The New Testament reading is from Revelation 21, verses 1 through 6. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them, they will be his peoples, and God himself will be with them and be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more, for the first things have passed away." And the one who was seated on the throne said, "See, I am making all things new." Also he said, "Write this, for these words are trustworthy and true." Then he said to me, "It is done. I am the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I will give water as a gift from the spring of the water of life."
I am a new member of the Pastors Advisory Council for Bright Stars of Bethlehem, a nonprofit that works for the thriving of Palestinian people through education and the arts at Dar Kalima University. This is the first and only university of arts and culture in all of Palestine. It's located in Bethlehem and had, until last week, a satellite center in Gaza. The tagline for Bright Stars of Bethlehem is, "Hope is what we do." And their vision? For all people of Palestine to have life in abundance. Sounds like a dream, doesn't it? Something out of Revelation 21. Something that sounds nice, but that we cannot even fathom or imagine today. I was in a meeting with the Reverend Dr. Mitri Rahab this week. Mitri served as the senior pastor of the Christmas Lutheran Church in Bethlehem for over 30 years. He's the author and editor of over 50 books. He's the most widely published Palestinian theologian. And he is the founder and president of Dar Kalima University. Mitri shared with us his dismay and his sense of abandonment that he and others felt this week when President Biden chose to make such a strong public statement denouncing the Israeli government's attack on humanitarian aid workers from World Central Kitchen. Finally, he said, the president, in a substantial way, expressed outrage and heartbreak at the Israeli government murdering people. But it revealed to me and all Palestinians that the lives of those 7 internationals must mean more than the lives of the 32,000 Palestinians that have died in the last 6 months. Mitri's tone was not one of accusation. It wasn't one of partisan politics. It was just deep and utter heartbreak. He went on to say that, of course, he is deeply grieved for the 7 aid workers who have died. He is grieved for the hostages held by Hamas, the violent terrorism inflicted upon the Jewish people. And he is grieved, he said, for his people. In the West Bank, where he lives, Palestinians are on the brink of poverty. 200,000 work permits have been canceled, so people can't go from the West Bank into Israel, which means they don't have income for their families. And those who happen to work in Bethlehem, they work in tourism, which of course is not alive and well right now. In Gaza, in addition to these 32,000 who have been killed, 1.2 million have been displaced or wounded. And during Holy Week, the Israeli military erased the satellite cultural center of Dar Kalima University. And this, by the way, comes just a few weeks after I heard from Pastor Hana Masad, the pastor of Gaza Baptist Church, that the Gaza Baptist Church has been completely destroyed as well. Since October 7th, the Israeli government has destroyed 11 Palestinian universities, 4 cultural centers, and 33 of the 36 hospitals in Gaza, and people are starving. One of Mitri's colleagues, who you'll hear about a little bit later in the sermon, Rana Albatrawi, said that when her family was fleeing from the north to the south, they finally were able to get some flour. They noticed, though, that it was kind of brown instead of white, as flour normally is, but they used it anyway to make bread because they were starving. But it made them incredibly sick. They started vomiting for days. This, mind you, in a place where there's no clean water, no food, no medical attention. Rana later found out that the flour was brown because it had been mixed with fodder, that is, animal feed. Animal feed that the human digestive system cannot handle, all to save money. And if you're surprised by that, as I was, because I had not heard that story, it could be because 87 journalists have been murdered in the last 6 months in Gaza. And you may have seen that just last week a law was passed to remove Al Jazeera reporters, not just from Gaza, not just from the West Bank, but even from Israel. So Calvary, as we begin in earnest this Eastertide series on the world made well, I want you to hear from a voice that knows better than I what it means to live in an unwell world. I want you to hear this Easter message from Reverend Dr. Mitri Rahab. It's just 4.5 minutes long.
Dear sisters and brothers, greetings from Bethlehem. For us Palestinian Christians, this Easter feels especially fraught. We have long warned that our ancient community, literally dating to Jesus' time, is on the brink of extinction. But this Easter, we bear witness to horrors never even imagined. Our ancient Christian community in Gaza, and with it thousands of years of Palestinian culture and heritage, disintegrates before our own eyes. Today we celebrated Palm Sunday, remembering Jesus' entry into Jerusalem, while we, the indigenous Palestinian Christians, are banned from entering the city. In Jerusalem, violent Israeli extreme settlers have been trying to force Christians out of home. Even before October 7th, the attacks on Christian institutions, clergy, and processions have quadrupled. During this Holy Week, we focus our eyes on the cross. If there is one symbol that best tells the Palestinian story, it is the cross. This is why so many Palestinian artists, Christians as well as Muslims, have depicted Jesus on the cross. Our Palestinian people have been carrying a heavy cross of occupation for decades. Often we felt abandoned and we were crying, "Where are you, God? Why did you forsake us?" Our people in Gaza are not asking anymore, "Where are you, God?" but "Where is humanity?" Humanity have failed them as they were led like a lamb to the slaughter. Human rights seems not to apply to them. Western countries cannot, after 6 months, even agree on a ceasefire. Arab and Muslim countries seems to have become numb. And as we walk our Via Dolorosa, many Western churches watch like Peter from far, afraid of identifying themselves with our suffering people. We in the West Bank are locked in our cities behind high concrete walls that has transformed our cities into pantostans, with the streets leading out of our towns blocked with huge road stones. We feel locked in by heavy stone, heavy occupation, and we keep asking, who will roll away the stone? We have been living for over 7 decades our long Saturday. We keep asking if and when Sunday will come, if and when our oppression will end, when we will obtain our liberation, our freedom to live in dignity and to reach our full potential. We are not waiting for angels to roll away the stone, but rather for people who hear the call for justice, for liberation, and for peace. Imagine the impact we could make if from every corner of the world our collective call for action, for a ceasefire, for liberation of all captives become impossible to ignore. May we receive during this Easter time the power to leave behind our fears and complicity and become agents of transformation. Let this Easter mark not just a day of celebration, but a day of mobilization, a day we choose to be catalyst for hope in action and for a long-lasting and a just peace. Dear sisters and brothers,
We're not waiting for angels to roll away the stone, but for the people to hear the call for justice, liberation, and peace. Let Easter not just be a celebration, but a day of mobilization, where we become catalysts for change, for justice, for peace. Calvary, this cry and this call, which we can hear from Gaza and the West Bank, which we hear from Ukraine, which we hear from Sudan, which we hear from the corners of our own lives that are full of suffering and tears and heartache and oppression and grief. This call is the backdrop for Revelation 21, the vision of the end toward which we must begin working today. You know, when the world is not well, when the world is awry, as it often is today, we lament. And often that lament becomes a longing that we could just get back to the way things were, get back to the beginning, when things were better, more just, more whole. But I wonder, when was that time? Biblically? Historically? Notions that our country needs to be made great again feels like a myth, doesn't it? When so many peoples in our country have never had a great life because of oppressive systems. This does not negate the dream of our country that we are to be a land of opportunity. It just proves that we have yet to ensure that our systems enable opportunity for all. The dream is not yet realized. And our salvation, our healing, and remember that the word salvation comes from the root word of salve, right? Balm, healing. Our salvation, our healing is in the present and in the future. It is not in our past. God is not calling us backward. God is beckoning us forward. Even Jesus himself, even the Messiah who came to save, who gave us each and every one of us individual grace, even Christ, when he rose from the dead on Easter morning, did not wipe his wounded hands and say, "What's done is done." No, he knew the work was not over. He went to the disciples huddled in fear in the upper room, and he breathed peace into them, gave them his spirit, and said, "Go, spread my love, spread the good news, be my hands and feet in the world." That the Spirit came down again on Pentecost, swept into the church, that is you and me, and we have to answer the call and have the courage and conviction to continue the work of Jesus, that thy kingdom would come on earth as it is in heaven. Jesus knew, even post-resurrection, that the kingdom had not yet come. He began the renewal and the restoration, but he did not finish it. His life gave us a powerful testimony of God's radical, life-giving, self-sacrificing, journeying in solidarity with love. But it was not the end of the story, was it? The hope and miracle of Easter is not a new love from God. It's just the ultimate reminder of God's love for all of humanity that has been with us since the beginning. The truth that, in the words of the Apostle Paul, nothing can separate us from God's love, not even death. The stone has been rolled away, the tomb is empty, the spirit of the risen Christ is at loose in your lives, in my life, and we, as I mentioned last week, are to have a risen vision of what our world can be, of what God deeply desires for the world to be. We're to raise our eyes above the newspapers, above the tragedy and horror around us, and see what God sees. See the time when there is no more pain, oppression, when the tears stop, the hurting ends. And you know, even when we in our beloved biblical stories, and trust me, I love the Bible, even when we go all the way back to our origin story in Scripture, when God created plants and animals and humans and called them good, when the Garden of Eden seemed to be the paradise that we all dream of, even in that story, as hopeful and as grounding as that is for us theologically, is it really something that we want to return to? I mean, none of our family or friends are there. Remember, there were just 2 people and a lot of animals. So maybe the most extreme introvert, botanist, survivalist among us would want to hearken back to the Garden of Eden. But to go back to such a state is to go back to before we existed. Further to the point, remember that the creation story was written in a time when the Israelites, the people of God, were really hurting, when they were oppressed. And so they created and imagined, dreamt this origin story of goodness because they needed hope. This was not a reality as they knew it in their day-to-day life as they wrote this story. It was a reality that they longed for as they suffered. The dreams and visions of the garden in Genesis are not unlike what John of Patmos describes for us at the very end of his revelation. John paints a picture for us of what the end will look like. And the difference between the end and the beginning is that while we were not around at the beginning, we actually have a chance. We have an invitation. We have a challenge even to be around at the end. And I don't mean the end like the Left Behind series end times or other non-biblical ideas like the rapture. Whatever John is describing here at the end, it's not about some grand destruction where the good Christians escape up to heaven while the rest of us sinners and heathen are left behind to smolder. No, this revelation, depicted as the beloved city of Jerusalem, Jerusalem where the temple was, where the place where the living presence of God was believed to be dwelling, where Jerusalem comes down among the people, that is about God coming and making God's self at home among mortals. Do you remember another story where this happened? Emmanuel, God with us. It's the Christmas story all over again, the incarnation. But the difference is that it takes us back even further to the creation story when God breathed over the waters of chaos to create calm. Because we learn in Revelation, I don't know if you caught it, it was right at the beginning, that there is no sea, no ocean. Now, why is that? This is very dismaying to you beach people out there, I know. Well, in Revelation, the sea's absence is precisely what indicates the eradication of death, mourning, crying, and pain. Because, as is true of other Jewish literature written around this time period, the sea represents where the evil empire resides and operates. Just a few chapters earlier, if you want to go home today and read this for fun, you can read about the great war of Satan, who takes his stand alongside in the sea, and a wicked beast arises out of that sea. The beast makes war against Jesus and his followers, kills them all. The beast has Babylon on its back. Babylon, you'll remember, is the oppressor of the Israel people. It is also secret code language in Revelation for Rome, for the empire. The beastly empire conducts its military and its diplomatic operations on the sea. And it also handles commerce on the sea. So as one scholar has said, in Revelation, the sea's absence is part of John's, and therefore God's, condemnation against an empire that uses war and commerce to oppress ordinary people. To remove the sea is to remove oppression. Through John, God paints a new vision declaring, I'm the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. John is simply trying to remind us here that God is always drawing us close to dwell with us. And God is always creating and recreating with us, not apart from us, up in some heaven, but here on earth. The vision of the end has been God's vision since the beginning. It's us. It's you and me. It's humanity. We're the ones who were slow to catch this vision, not God. The kingdom of God is near, Jesus said. Near, not far away, near enough that God knows we could just get there if we, guess what? If we loved one another. If we saw each other as beloved images of the divine, because if we did that, we would not stand to kill each other. Calvary, as the Christian church today, we have to decide that we are going to begin at the end. We have to declare that we know the end of the story already. We know that God has declared how things will be, that there will be no more death, no more pain, no more mourning. God will be with us. God will wipe the tears from our eyes. Just as we talked last week about this risen vision of the risen Christ in our midst, I invite us, I challenge ourselves today to anchor ourselves in this vision, this revelation, as we work for the world made well, to see what God is showing us, that here at the end, we have our starting place. So often we read Revelation as predictive of events to come, but actually Revelation is something called apocalyptic literature, which means that it's really more about revealing than predicting. In other words, the vision John is describing in these verses is not about viewing the future through a crystal ball. No, instead, John's vision lets us see God's true and present home among us now, but without the veil of human destruction and violence. It's like this reality where we're living in what God has created, but we have put this oppressive thing on top of it that keeps us from seeing the goodness of one another. And John is lifting up that veil that we have put over the world for us to see what God sees. Perhaps it's science fiction at its best, right? Inviting us to see what we cannot yet see. To say it one more way, Revelation 21 includes these elements of creation, no more sea. It includes elements of the incarnation, God dwelling with God's people. It includes elements of resurrection, that death will be no more, that God is making all things new. And while taking all of these elements that are in our past, Revelation 21 uses them to point us to the future, to reiterate the truth that God has been showing us from the beginning, that in the end all will be well, because God is the Alpha and the Omega. If we could just peel off the unwellness in the world, like a paint by number book or one of those sticker books where you put a picture together by putting stickers, and it's a lot of hand-eye coordination, But if we do that, piece by piece, sticker by sticker, we can reveal the vision, the truth of God's love. And what if we lived with this vision of courage and conviction? What if, Calvary, we stood up for justice and peace as automatically as we stand up for the doxology? Think about it. If we know that God desires for all things to be well, if we know that is the end of our story, then it's up to us to hurry up and write our way to that ending. We write our way to that ending by taking risks. We write our way to that ending by beginning to let go of comfort and embrace courage. We write our way to that ending by proclaiming the bold, audacious testimony of God's love, and that God desires for every human life to be protected. And lest we think it's too hard, lest we think that it's just too daunting in the world for us to take a first step and to begin in that direction, lest we think that all is lost, perhaps this story will make you think twice. The director of that Gaza satellite program I was telling you about for Dar Kalima University, her name is Rana Albatrawi. She had to flee to Egypt with her family, but other co-workers of hers remain in the southern parts of Gaza, and she shared with us this week in our meeting that, of course, the war has brought unbearable shock. Everyone has lost loved ones. Everyone is displaced from their homes. Everyone is hungry. She said, it feels like we are dead while we're alive. She says, it feels like we're walking around alive, but we are dead. So, she said, we made a conscious decision that even as we were going to try to keep safe, we made a decision that more important than safety was life, was hope. We knew that we would try to be safe, but we knew that our end could not be safety. Safety is not salvation, she said. We knew that our ultimate end had to be hope, because where there is hope, there is life. So she and her team, they continue their work, even though their building has been destroyed, their homes are gone, the people are displaced. She said, we continue the art. The art is what we know, it's what we teach, it's who we are. It makes us feel alive, and we need to feel alive. We deserve to feel alive, she says, because we feel dead otherwise. As our pastor, Reverend Mitri, says, hope does not wait for a vision to appear. Hope is vision in action today. So Calvary, as they were fleeing, Rana and her team started to go to different shelters to see if children wanted to do art. And at first, they were just doing art activities for the kids. But now they're getting requests to do more and more, to go to more places. So they're seeking out different shelters to bring art to the streets. The adults want it too. People are risking their lives to be in the street, to do art, to create, to be together. This week, her team is in Gaza City doing pop-up art camps and activities, offering psychosocial services for kids and adults. And she told us this week, she said, a lot of people talk about hope in the abstract, but hope is not a theory. This is hope. We do hope. Hope is art. It is what makes us alive instead of dead. This is the next generation of creative leaders in Palestine. These are the Easter people. This is the world we must live in, she said, the world we must create and show to the rest of the world so that they see us as human, as resilient, as worthy of being alive. People want us to believe that death is the end. Death is a given, she said, but hope is the beginning of all things. It always has been. Calvary, because we know how the story ends, there is no ambiguity about what we must do to begin writing our way there. Like Rana and her team, we must believe the vision of hope. Jesus didn't point back to the creation story and say, the Garden of Eden is at hand. Jesus said, the kingdom of God is at hand. May it be so. Amen.